And we're back with my favorite part of the Malzberg show every day. It's the, well, today can we call it the Malzberg / Unger panel? Only today, only this once. The Malzberg panel with two of my favorites for this little adventure. We've got Heather Hansen, trial attorney, columnist. HNGN.com is where you can find what she has to say in her writing. And also joined by Carol Roth, who comes to us from Chicago. She's a CNBC contributor and the author of the New York Times bestseller, The Entrepreneur Equation. Ladies, welcome.
Good to be here.
Good to be here with you, Rick.
So guys, let's start out with Hillary. What better thing to talk about on a Friday before Memorial Day than Hillary Clinton's Benghazi emails? So Heather, you said you've had some time to read through them.
Oh, it's like a document dump beyond all document dumps on a Friday afternoon before a holiday. I've started reading them. They are dense. Some of them are interesting, but there's no smoking gun thus far. What's very clear is there was a lot of confusion. There was a very strong awareness of the danger there, without a doubt. There was a lot of moving parts. But as far as I've read, and as far as we've seen, you haven't seen any newspaper come out with a big bomb. There's nothing there yet.
Carol, are you surprised by that, Carol? After all, if we're going to listen to the critics of Hillary Clinton, she would have cleaned out everything she didn't want us to see by wiping them off the server and wiping the server in itself. So does this come as a big surprise to you? Did you expect to see anything?
I did not, because this is an artisanal, handcrafted, selected group of emails that was personally selected for our reading enjoyment. So not only did she go through, wipe everything she didn't want, and hand print 55,000 documents, which if you can think about the tax that's involved with that, you've got to have some pretty strong commitment, i.e. bad things going on, in order to do that. And then so she hand printed them, and then she turned them over, and then somebody else went through those and hand selected an artisanal, handcrafted group of selected emails for us to read. So we've had multiple layers of people looking through them, making sure that there was not only no smoking gun, but nothing where there was even some dry powder. And so it's absolutely ridiculous that we're giving any credence to this.
And yet, knowing that there's nothing to get too excited about in this batch of emails for all the reasons that you just said, or because it's legit, she sent in everything she should have sent in, one or the other. But knowing that hasn't stopped some of the media today from reporting that Hillary knew that Al-Qaeda was behind the Benghazi attacks, and she knew it 2 days after and didn't disclose it. How did she know it? Because her friend, Mr. Blumenthal, told her so. Now, guys, you have to acknowledge there's a bit of a logic flaw here. For the past couple of days, conservative media has been beating the you-know-what out of Blumenthal because he didn't work for the government, and who is he, and why is Hillary listening to him and passing his emails and advice on to other State Department employees. And yet today, when they see an email where he suggested that maybe it was Al-Qaeda, now all of a sudden she's supposed to take his word for it and tell everybody that that's what happened.
Listen, Rick, there's definitely some confusion there, and there was some confusion right after it happened. I don't think that that's what the media should be focused on. If they're going to focus on anything in these emails right now, it should be the fact that the FBI has now classified one part of at least one email that she, being Hillary Clinton, didn't feel was secretive or mattered to be classified. And it just goes to show that the use of this email server was inappropriate.
Carolyn, you got a few seconds left in this segment. What do you have to say about that?
I think that inappropriate is a very kind way of saying absolutely ridiculous. And the worst part about the whole thing is who's paying for all of this time and all this money going over these things.
Let me hold you there. You're both coming back. We're going to continue with more of the Malzberg panel with Carol Roth and Heather Hansen, and we're going to do it right after this. Don't go anywhere. The Malzberg Show continues. Back with part two of the Malzberg panel. Joining us is Heather Hansen, trial attorney, columnist over at HNGN.com, and the person I am lucky enough to sit next to every night on the Daily Wrap. Also joining Carol Roth, CNBC contributor, author of the New York Times bestseller, The Entrepreneur Equation, and lucky enough to be hanging out in the Windy City, Chicago. Ladies, welcome back.
Good to be here.
So let's talk about what's going on with the Patriot Act. Do we think it's going to survive? Do we think, what are we going to do? I mean, the president is now pushing the Senate to reach some kind of a compromise, either taking what the House passed and either accepting it or doing something. But what's going to happen here?
You know what, I think we're going to have a little bit more push-pull before they come to any sort of compromise, and I think ultimately it's just going to be kicking the barrel down the road as we do all the time. I think that the U.S. Freedom Act is a strong law.
That's the law that the House passed.
That is the law that the House passed. And the only difference between that and the Patriot Act, to my mind, is that the phone companies will be keeping the data as opposed to the government keeping the data. The data is still kept. The data is still available for the government. If the government wants to get a warrant, they can do so very quickly and have access to that data, but rather than having it all in the government's hand, it is in the phone company's hand, where it would be anyway.
Carol, why should I feel better about that? Why should I feel better about the phone company having all of my information?
It's like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, the government or the phone company. Right. What kind of a choice is that, Heather?
Well, I know it's not a good one, Carol, but the fact is the phone company keeps it anyway. It's part of their records. It's what they do.
They've always had.
They've got to keep it. It's just what, it's part of the law under which they function. Whereas with the government has it, it just seems a little bit more creepy, and it's unnecessary. We know for a fact that what they have gotten under the Patriot Act hasn't led to any arrests.
Well, guys, isn't it that's an important point. Everything that they've collected under the Patriot Act has yet to even lead to one arrest. So let me ask the obvious question. Do we need the government or the phone company to hold on to this information?
No, we absolutely do not. I mean, the problem with the government is even when we have these great intentions, they don't do a really good job of thinking about what it is that they're trying to accomplish and the best and most efficient way to accomplish it. And so we end up with these ridiculous laws that make you and me have to jump through 10 millions of hoops, sometimes infringing upon our rights, and they don't actually ever do anything. I mean, really nothing that the government does is ever effective. So from my standpoint, I hope it does go away. I hope the NSA goes away. I hope they just keep repealing everything until we get to some semblance of a government that isn't like a crazy house.
Carol, let me bring up the other side of this equation, which is you've got Google, you've got Facebook, you have all of these companies that are refusing to provide a key that would allow the government to get into their back doors if there is a good reason, assuming it was a good reason, for them to have to collect information. Now, if those companies aren't going to cooperate because they're afraid that providing the government with a key might provide everybody with a key, then what can the government do to get vital information when there is vital information?
Call me cynical here, but I kind of feel like if they really want to get information, they have ways to get information. I mean, we've got the most powerful government in the entire world that has all kinds of money and all kinds of resources. If they really want to get something, they'll find a way to get something. So I'm going to go beyond the political theater here, Rick.
I don't know that that's true, though.
I think there's a balance that we have to reach here, and I don't know the answer, but I think it's something that they have to hash out. You've got Loretta Lynch today saying that she thinks that we will be less safe if it is the Patriot Act is not continued. I think there are a lot of people who feel that way. Mike Lee from Utah was arguing strongly against Chris Christie's view. So there's
But based on what? Based on what? A feeling?
Well, I think it based on the information that they do receive. I mean, I know that it wasn't found from the Patriots Act, but just in general with metadata, with computers. I mean, we know that most of the people who have been allegedly going to ISIS or talking about going to ISIS who have been arrested, they get that information from Facebook, from emails,
I can
from
get
text
that off
messages.
of Twitter. I can see all the people who are supporting ISIS off of Twitter. I'm not the government. It costs me nothing.
All right, in the short time we have left, let me get you to a final topic here because I really want to hear what you have to say. New Rasmussen poll out says that fewer Americans want boots on the ground in the battle against ISIL. But there's another poll out, I believe it's a Pew poll, that says that Americans are warming to the idea of boots on the ground. Start with you, Carol. What do you think? Do we need to send Americans over there to take these guys on?
I think the one thing the polls show is that Americans are generally confused and probably shouldn't be trusted when making major decisions about foreign policy. I'll go back to what I was saying before. The challenge is we never have a clear mission and objective. I think there are other ways with special ops that we can accomplish taking down ISIS, which I do think is very important. But having, the dog and pony show and risking the lives of large numbers of soldiers is not something that I'm not on board with.
Heather, you get the last word on this.
Yeah, I agree in theory with with you. I just think that there is definitely a risk here. You know, we saw a report today that they're on the verge of getting a nuclear bomb, which I don't think is true, but I do think they're very dangerous and we need to do something.
All right, guys, thanks so much. As always, an interesting panel. Heather, you're coming back to give us a little preview in tonight's Daily Wrap, so we'll get back to you shortly. But coming up next, we have an interview that Steve Malzberg did with columnist for the Daily Beast, Eleanor Clift, and we're going to have that in just a moment, so don't go anywhere. I've seen it. Great interview. Stay with us.